Hi, my name is Nick, and welcome to Nick's Picks Watch Reviews, the YouTube channel where we look at watches that I would pick, I might pick, or I have picked. And today we're going to be looking at a watch that I've picked. In fact, it was the very first Swiss-made dive watch, or really Swiss-made watch of any kind, that I picked, and that was the TAG Aquaracer Calibre 5 automatic 300 meters, the reference number WAN2111. And this is a watch that I didn't seek out and go and try to buy. I was shopping in general for watches. I wanted a watch that could go with me on a business trip over to Boston. And I was looking around at all the different places that offer watches nearby. I was looking at, maybe I go to the Seiko boutique, which they had one actually locally. And it was fantastic. And I had my selection of anything I wanted. And I fell in love with a blue Seiko 5 there. And I was like, this is amazing. And then from there, I was like, well, what about a Tissot? And I'm just kind of working up the price range. And then from there, I was like, if I'm already spending nearly $1,000, what is just another $1,000? And started looking at TAG. And of course, just for a few thousand more at that point, I mean, this was a while ago, I could have gotten a Rolex Submariner. But I was like, all right, well, I'm already kind of pushing some barriers that I don't know if I want to break through yet. I hadn't yet purchased a watch over $2,000 or even over $1,000. I mainly had Seiko watches and or things like that. And so this was a pretty big departure from what I had been buying. And in this case, it was a Swiss-made watch. I did know that I wanted something blue. And so that was something that did drive my purchasing decisions, which is no surprise probably, as you've seen a lot of the blue watches that I've purchased over the years, that blue would be kind of what I'd be after. Now, in this case, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. As we look at this watch, we're going to be looking at it with an eye towards long-term ownership, because like I said, this is the very first Swiss-made watch that I purchased. And what I'd like to talk about is the long-term ownership of that, with a look towards not only, what are the costs involved in owning it for that long and what's the service like, but what is value retention like? And specifically, usually you think about value retention associated with different brands. What is the value retention of, let's say, a TAG? In this case, it's a TAG Heuer. It says TAG bigger than Heuer now, though, which is kind of sad. I wish it just said Heuer. That would be totally fine. TAG, you didn't have to slap your name on it when you bought it. You don't just, slap the acquisition history stacking up mile high. You can just stick with the name of the thing that you bought because you paid for that. You paid for the brand. You didn't have to do that. We're not only going to look at the value retention, the cost over time, but also just the experience, day-to-day wear, what works, what doesn't work, what over time did I realize was maybe not as awesome as originally I thought it might have been, and things like that. So let's go ahead and dig right into it. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the specifications here. We have a TAG Heuer Aquaracer, reference number WAN2111. Now, this was originally released in 2011, and this example was purchased in 2014. So this is the 7-year review. In terms of the size, it is 41 millimeters, although when I originally bought it, I could have sworn it was 42. It wears larger than it would originally appear. Its lug width is 20 millimeters, making it work with pretty much any strap or bracelet you might have. Lug to lug is 46.7 millimeters, so it does wear nicely on a variety of wrists. Its thickness is 11.5 millimeters, lending some additional versatility. Its material is stainless steel. It's powered by the Calibre 5. And you might think, okay, Calibre 5 from TAG, so it's an in-house movement? No, not at all. So it's basically an Edit 2824-2, maybe, but maybe it's in Sellita SW200-1. It depends on when you purchased it and what TAG felt like putting inside of it. In fact, that's one aspect of this watch that has garnered a lot of criticism over the years, is that, hey, this has a movement that you're saying is one thing, but really we can look at it and we can tell you that this is actually one of the cheapest movements that ETA produces in their automatic watches. Yes, it's a movement that can be COSC certified. They have grades of it. They have top grade and all these different grades of it. And you can regulate them and get them certified. However, in this case, they opted to not do that, both not get it certified and apparently not regulate it, which they might have, but in my case, I didn't really see I didn't see that happen. So we'll talk about that later. In terms of energy, of course, it is a self-winding movement, power reserve of 38 hours, all the things that we'd expect from an ETA 2824-2. It does feature a sapphire crystal. The caseback is a very beautifully engraved stainless steel, and I got to give it props on the case. They did a really good job with that. In terms of water resistance, that case is able to hold back the pressure of 300 meters of water all around it, and your body would not really like that. In fact, if you're diving, that's probably deeper than you're going to go anyway, so it does the job. That said, when I purchased this, there was a 500-meter option, so that was available at that time. I opted for the thinner, more elegant 300-meter option because, honestly, I've never been that deep in my life, and I was happy with that. Now, so far, a lot of the watches we've looked at have ceramic bezels, right? So if we look at dive watches and in the modern context, most of the bezels are ceramic, and that's a material that's great for scratch resistance, maybe not so much shatter resistance, and it has a look that doesn't fade, doesn't tarnish, doesn't change over time. It's timeless. But when we look at this watch, it is an aluminum bezel. And so in this case, it does run the risk of getting scratched and dinged and nicked and bent and all that fun stuff. And in this case, it has been. I actually replaced this one recently, as we'll see, but it had been beat up a little bit. As far as the bracelet's concerned, there's not much of note there. It is a double retention stamped clasp, and it has a dive extension with a few degrees of micro adjust available as well if you have a spring bar tool. The clasp does the job. The dive extension doesn't look great when it's out. And of course, I'm not a huge fan of stamped clasps. They do rattle quite a bit. The adjustment on this one is not on the fly adjustment. I do prefer on the fly adjustment if I can get it. Now, as for Lume, this is one of the places where this watch shines. Yes, I intended that pun, but it really does. I didn't adjust the ISO on this shot. This is exactly how I took the other shots. Usually, if I'm taking a darker shot, I will adjust the ISO up, which, you get some noise and you're going to lose some, potential detail there, but you will be able to see the brightness come through. In this case, I didn't adjust it at all, and it was still bright. I could still see it. So the brightness, I don't know how well it's going to come through, but in this case, it is an exceptionally bright watch. It doesn't have an amazing amount of staying power, but it does stay for quite a few hours. So if you have a short nap in the middle of the night, you might be able to still see what time it is when you wake up. If you actually have a full night's sleep, which is rare for me anyway, usually I don't get a full night's sleep, but let's pretend that I did. In that case, I might struggle to see it at the end of the night. Now, the overall look is actually quite nice. It is a pretty versatile watch in terms of its case height, which we discussed. It's a fairly thin watch. It delivers in the case height department. It also delivers in the finishing department in terms of at least the external finishing. If you would have seen the handset up close, maybe not as pretty. If you look at the indexes, not as pretty. But hey, if you're looking at them with uncorrected eyes, so if you have glasses, just take them off. If you have contacts, take them out. And you look at it, it's beautiful. You can see that sunburst. You can see, all that detail there is great. But as far as the external finishing, it's actually pretty well considered, right? So they have the high polished edges, which allow you to, have that little bit of flashiness, but then brushed pretty much everywhere else so that you can actually wear it day to day, bang it up, and it doesn't look too bad. So I do want to call out one con here for sure. Accuracy out of the box. Now, keep in mind, this is not third-party certified. It's not COSC certified. It's not anything certified. And I question whether it was actually regulated from the factory when I purchased it back in 2014. In this case, my example was running worse than minus 15 seconds per day, which you might say, well, that's not terrible. I have a Seiko 7S36 movement or whatever that's running within that, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Why do you need that? Well, why I need it is because I paid over $2,000 to end up with a ETA 2824-2, which is very easily regulated to within COSC standards, or at least very near to that. And so that was extra work on my part to regulate this. And that shouldn't have been the case. It should have been regulated from the factory, should have been running pretty darn near perfectly for that price point with the margin that they had, right? So it's a lower cost movement compared to like an ETA 2982, an ETA 2892. Some of those numbers are there in different order. But it's a lower cost, but they have bigger margins to work with at that point by using that lower cost movement. And hopefully they could pay a watchmaker to, move a screw a little bit before shipping it off. And so I feel like that was certainly a missed opportunity, extra cost in terms of either time or dollars on my side to make that happen. Now, that being said, having sent it in for a full service later, right? So this is now long after the warranty expired, long after that regulation job basically no longer mattered because the movement was desperately in need of service. The seals had basically not held up over the years. There's quite a bit of work it needed. So it was running pretty low amplitude, wasn't great in terms of accuracy anymore. Seals were pretty shot. The bracelet was well worn. Everything about it, it was time. There was even a scratch in the sapphire, scratches in the bezel. The scratches in the bezel weren't too bad, but there's multiple scratches in the aluminum bezel. I sent it in. I was like, all right, let's see how close they can get it to factory fresh. And what would it cost to take a watch that, when I purchased it, looked factory fresh because it was? What would it take to get it back to that point? And the answer to that is actually, it was only a few $100. It was reasonable cost, but maybe not reasonable with the overall cost of the watch. But we'll kind of break it down here. So we'll kind of go through piece by piece what it was that had to be dealt with. In total, this watch has experienced 3 separate services. The very first service was to deal with the crown and the crown tube. In fact, both of those were replaced. The crown stopped threading on the crown tube. It actually got stuck. And so that had to be replaced straight away. That was a few $100. That was actually very disappointing because the warranty had just expired. After that, the next service that it had was a regulation, which didn't have any parts changing. And finally, the one I most recently did was the full service, which replaced the crystal because it was scratched, which you can't see it, but I promise you there is a scratch on the crystal. It just did not come through in this image. And yes, that is the original crystal. All these are the original parts that were replaced. And this crystal is actually fairly thick. If you look at the side of it here, it is fairly thick. So well done, TAG, on choosing a crystal that will withstand the pressure and still provide clarity. Along with the crystal, there's a gasket around the crystal that had to be replaced. And of course, the gaskets and seals throughout the watch we had mentioned were needing replacement at that point. It had experienced actual diving and day-to-day life and everything around that. So in addition to that, for cosmetic reasons only, the bezel insert, the aluminum bezel insert, was also replaced. It had a few scratches here and there, and it just didn't look brand new. And I wanted to know, what does it cost to make it brand new? And the answer is, for the most recent service, about a third of the market price currently of the watch. Not the retail price, but the current market price. Adding to that the other services that it had already experienced, it is about equal to the market price of the watch today. Now, the service itself was exceptional. The service team took great care to nicely package and present the watch, to return all the original parts, and even to follow special instructions about what not to fix when I requested that. So what is the thing that I'm happy that the service department didn't address? Well, actually, I told them not to address it. It was this scratch here on the bracelet. That scratch, which really is in the shape of a lightning bolt if you look at it in a variety of different lighting, that scratch I got while swimming off the coast of Hawaii. I banged it into a rock as I was basically on the bottom of the ocean. And I actually used that watch quite a bit out there. I swam with dolphins. I kind of chased them. They enjoyed it, though. Then we had fun. I snorkeled and looked at coral and different fish out there. It was a beautiful time and a lovely memory, and one that I am happy to wear around with me and keep tucked on a part where I can only see it if I look for it. So I want to talk about one last thing that is something I typically don't talk about, which is cost versus value retention. This watch has a lower price tag compared to other higher-end luxury watches. It's able to deliver that by making some compromises. It makes compromises on the finishing of the handset, finishing of the dial. It makes compromises on the movement itself and the regulation of that movement, as we found. So it makes some compromises to deliver cost savings for the manufacturer that do get passed on to you as well. You get to purchase a nice looking and feeling watch for a lower cost. However, that lower cost initially is kind of hiding the fact that this is actually one of my most expensive watches. It's one of my most expensive watches because value retained is less than half of what I've paid, and service costs are more than half of what I initially paid. So in terms of value retained, and service cost versus price paid, this costs a lot of money versus something that costs even more. A Rolex Submariner. Hey, I got that. That was nice. This costs a lot of money when you look at the price tag. But then if you compare that with service cost and value retention, the service interval on my Rolex Submariner is actually longer than the service interval on my TAG Aquaracer, meaning for the same time period, it requires fewer services. The service is more expensive as a factor of pure dollars, but is less expensive from a perspective of percentage of purchase price. So I'm actually spending closer to, I should say, the purchase price with a tag than I am with a Rolex when it comes to service directly with the brand. Now, if you go to an independent watchmaker, it's just a 2824-2 in the tag. You'll have a great time. They will not charge you an arm and a leg. That being said, if I go to sell my Submariner, which it's not for sale, I'm not going to sell it. Don't even ask. Don't even start. I get the messages directly. It's super annoying. It's mine. I'm happy with it. I'm keeping it. If I go to sell that, which I'm not, again, not going to happen, I would actually yield a profit versus what I paid originally. So from that perspective, in a way, that watch was free. It's saving money disguised as spending money. That's how I've justified it to my wife. Don't tell her otherwise, that I've not actually believed that in my heart of hearts. But technically, at this moment in time, it's true. I don't believe it's wise to invest in watches long term because values over time are not predictable. You might say, well, it's a Rolex and it's a hype piece. It's certainly going to go up in value and I'm going to be able to invest in this. No, it's not certainly going to go up in value. It's likely to go up in value based on recent history, but recent history is just that. It's recent. And this phenomenon with social media driving this hype cycle of people just feeding off of that and driving up the cost of watches is a relatively recent and new phenomenon. And I don't know how long that will continue. I don't know if the next generation will value timepieces like this generation has valued it, or at least my generation has, and the previous generations. I also don't know if there's going to be an exhaustion with flexing culture and, chasing these hype pieces. There's going to become a saturation point where either people get tired of it, whether it's tired of the watches themselves, tired of the game of trying to buy a watch, tired of certain brands or styles. None of these things can be counted on. When it comes to investments, I appreciate investments that are a little bit more predictable, a little bit less reliant on human whimsy, human desire in the moment, but are based on things that are sustainable over time, things that can grow over time, and things that can reach every person in every organization on the planet. Not a small subset of the population that's willing to spend nearly as much as a car on a timepiece that is made completely unnecessary by the modern world. I don't know that that is a wise investment. So don't invest in watches. Yes, you might get lucky. Congratulations if you have. Anyway, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I think what I'm trying to say is we're probably done. This is probably it. We're done with this review. Is this a great pick? Well, for me at the time, it was a good pick. Long-term ownership, I think if this was the only piece in your collection and you were committed to that for all of time and you didn't care about, burning monies and spending monies and just saying that money is spent and it is now in this piece and this timepiece is something I'm going to love and cherish, then that's fine. If you're going for long-term value retention, this is not where to get it. If you're going for something that's going to be reliable over time, the movement will be, you can get it serviced pretty much anywhere and you will have a fairly reliable movement. I haven't found every part of this to be super reliable. That being said, it served me well. It's been on a lot of different journeys and adventures with me. It was my first Swiss watch. And for that reason, I will always look at it with rose-colored glasses rather, and love and cherish it. Would I pick it today? Probably not. Value retention, Still not great for the brand. But again, that doesn't have to be your motivation. And honestly, you'll probably have more fun in the hobby if it isn't. I've seen a lot of red, a lot of negative high numbers of percentage next to my collection that I track in Chrono 24 for insurance purposes. It's, yeah, some of it's not pretty. But that's okay. You know, if you love the hobby, then enjoy it. All right, so that's all for this time. We will see you next week, maybe. I might take a week off next week. I haven't decided. We'll see. Until then, take care. If you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe to both this channel and the About Time channel, give this video a like, and hit that notification bell to be notified about future episodes. This is what that sounds like. Ooh. We're not going to include that. That does not sound good.